The Whispering Dollhouse. In the quiet stillness of an old Victorian mansion, hidden away in the attic behind a dusty veil of time, there stood an antique dollhouse. Its ornate facade, reminiscent of a bygone era, housed a chilling secret that waited patiently for curious souls to uncover. Emily, a bright-eyed young girl, had always been drawn to the mysteries of the past. Her grandmother, the keeper of the old mansion, had often regaled her with tales of the dollhouse, but she had never ventured into the attic to explore it herself. That was about to change. One gloomy afternoon, Emily's curiosity got the better of her. She crept up the creaking staircase, her small feet barely making a sound. The attic door, heavy with age, groaned in protest as she pushed it open. The room was dimly lit, and dust motes danced in the filtered sunlight that streamed through a small, circular window. There it was, as her grandmother had described, a dollhouse of exquisite craftsmanship. Its miniature windows were adorned with lace curtains, and tiny ivy vines crept up the facade. Emily couldn't help but marvel at its intricacy. Approaching the dollhouse, Emily reached out to touch it. Her fingers brushed against the smooth wood, sending shivers down her spine as an unexpected chill filled the air. She pulled her hand back, startled. A hushed whisper, like the soft sigh of the wind, seemed to emanate from the dollhouse itself. The dollhouse sat there, unassuming, but the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Emily leaned in closer, straining to decipher the words. The voices were faint and ethereal, like distant memories seeking to be heard. "Daisy, don't go. Forgive me." The words sent a shiver down Emily's spine. Daisy was her great-aunt, who had vanished mysteriously many years ago. Emily had heard whispers about her from the adults, but no one would speak openly of what had happened. Emily's curiosity was piqued, and she couldn't resist the urge to explore further. With trembling hands, she opened the dollhouse's front door. Inside, she found an exact replica of her grandmother's mansion, complete with miniature furniture and tiny porcelain dolls. The dolls, like the miniature house, were frozen in time. But as Emily watched, she noticed something that sent her heart racing. The dolls were moving. Their tiny porcelain eyes followed her every move, and their faces contorted into expressions of pain and sorrow. The whispers grew more pronounced as Emily peered into the miniature world. "Help us find the truth. Bring her back." Emily couldn't tear her gaze away. She reached out and touched one of the dolls, and it sprang to life, its movements eerily lifelike. It began to speak, its voice filled with anguish. "Daisy, lost, shadows, trapped." Emily's heart ached with empathy for the tiny, tormented figure. She knew she had to uncover the truth behind Daisy's disappearance, not just for the doll but for her family's sake. As night fell, Emily returned to the attic, determined to unravel the secrets of the dollhouse. She combed through old letters and photographs, discovering that Daisy had been a bright and curious girl, much like herself. She had been drawn to the mysteries of the mansion, just as Emily was now drawn to the dollhouse. Emily's grandmother, hearing her granddaughter's findings, sat down beside her. She revealed the painful truth, that Daisy had gone missing in the attic, in the very room where the dollhouse now stood. A shadowy presence had taken her, leaving only her porcelain doll as a haunting reminder. As Emily and her grandmother delved deeper into the family's history, they uncovered a dark secret, an ancestor who had dabbled in forbidden rituals, opening a gateway to the shadows that lurked within the attic. These malevolent spirits had taken Daisy, binding her soul to the dollhouse, and their torment had echoed through generations. With newfound determination, Emily and her grandmother devised a plan to free Daisy's spirit from its porcelain prison. As the clock struck midnight, they ventured into the attic, carrying with them a candle and an old family heirloom, a pendant that had been blessed by a powerful medium. In the eerie glow of the candlelight, Emily held the pendant aloft. The spirits, sensing their presence, began to stir. Whispers filled the room, growing louder and more desperate. With a voice full of love and compassion, Emily called out to Daisy's spirit, urging her to break free from the dollhouse's grip. As she chanted, the pendant glowed with a soft, soothing light, and the dollhouse itself seemed to tremble. Then, in a burst of blinding light, Daisy's spirit was freed from her porcelain prison. The attic filled with a warm, comforting presence, and Emily could feel Daisy's gratitude and relief. As the first rays of dawn illuminated the attic, the dollhouse lay still, its whispers silenced forever. The spirits that had tormented Daisy's family for generations had been banished, and peace was finally restored to the old Victorian mansion. Emily and her grandmother knew that the dollhouse would remain a relic of the past, its secrets forever locked away. But they also knew that their family's history, once shrouded in darkness, had now found closure. And Porcelain Eyes, hidden away in the shadowy recesses of a forgotten alleyway, nestled between ancient, crumbling buildings, lay Mr. Holloway's decrepit doll shop. Its windows, obscured by layers of grime and dust, barely hinted at the treasures it held within. Sarah, a collector with a penchant for the strange and unusual, had heard whispers about this mysterious shop for years. It was said to be a place where dolls of every kind resided, each one more lifelike and unsettling than the last. She couldn't resist the lure of the macabre and decided to pay Mr. Holloway a visit one fateful afternoon. As she stepped inside the dimly lit shop, the musty scent of old wood and faded memories enveloped her. The shelves were lined with dolls, some in pristine condition, others showing the wear and tear of time. But there, on a dusty corner shelf, Sarah found what she had been seeking, a doll unlike any she had ever seen. It was a delicate porcelain doll, dressed in a faded lavender gown, with golden ringlets cascading down its back. What truly caught Sarah's attention were its eyes, startlingly lifelike and intensely blue. They seemed to pierce through her very soul. Mr. Holloway, an elderly man with a gnarled countenance, observed Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He warned her in a gravelly voice, "Be cautious, young lady, for the dolls here are not what they seem. They hold secrets best left undisturbed." But Sarah was undeterred. Her obsession with the porcelain doll and its hauntingly beautiful eyes was all-consuming. She paid a hefty price, and as she left the shop, she could have sworn she heard Mr. Holloway muttering something that sounded like a curse. Back in her dimly lit apartment, Sarah placed the porcelain doll on a small table by her bedside. Its piercing blue eyes seemed to follow her every move, watching her with an unsettling intensity. She dismissed it as mere paranoia, a trick of the dim lighting, and retired for the night. But as she lay in bed, she couldn't escape the feeling of being observed. She would awaken in the middle of the night to find the porcelain doll had moved, its eyes now trained on her as she slept. Sarah attributed this to her own restless mind and continued to dismiss the eerie occurrences. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's obsession with the doll deepened. She spent hours gazing into its eyes, lost in their enchanting depths. She had isolated herself from friends and family, her every waking moment devoted to the porcelain doll. One evening, as Sarah sat before the doll, she noticed something peculiar. The doll's eyes seemed to change, the intense blue darkening to a shade of stormy gray. Sarah gasped and recoiled, convinced that her own mind was playing tricks on her. But the unsettling events were far from over. Dolls began appearing throughout her apartment, each one more lifelike and unnerving than the last. They perched on her windowsills, sat at her dining table, and even seemed to crawl out of her closet at night. Sarah's apartment became a suffocating labyrinth of porcelain eyes that followed her every move. She couldn't escape their unblinking gaze, and their presence filled her with an overwhelming sense of dread. Frantic and tormented, Sarah returned to Mr. Holloway's shop, desperate for answers. She found him in the same dimly lit room, surrounded by the eerie dolls. His eyes held a knowing glint as he explained the sinister truth. "These dolls are not ordinary, my dear," he croaked. "They are vessels for souls, trapped by an ancient curse. The more you obsess over them, the more they ensnare your soul in return." Terror coursed through Sarah as the implications of her obsession became clear. She begged Mr. Holloway for a way to break the curse, to free herself from the porcelain eyes that watched her ceaselessly. With a weary sigh, Mr. Holloway presented her with a small, ornate box. Inside was a delicate porcelain eye, identical to those of the haunting dolls. "To break the curse, you must replace your soul with this eye," he explained. "But beware, for you shall become one of them, forever imprisoned within the doll." Sarah knew she had no other choice. She couldn't bear to spend another moment imprisoned by the porcelain eyes that haunted her. With trembling hands, she removed her own eye and replaced it with the porcelain one from the box. In an instant, her world was plunged into darkness. She could feel herself being pulled away, her consciousness merging with the porcelain doll that had ensnared her. As her vision faded, she could see her own body, now lifeless, lying on the floor. Sarah had become one of them, a trapped soul within the confines of a porcelain doll. Her once beautiful eyes now stared out from its hollow sockets, watching the world through unblinking porcelain. Mr. Holloway placed the doll on a dusty shelf, where it joined the countless others, each one holding a tormented soul. The cursed doll shop remained hidden away in the forgotten alleyway, waiting for the next curious collector to fall under its sinister spell. The Marionette's Curse. In the heart of the city stood a grand theater, a place steeped in history and secrets. Its ornate facade concealed tales of tragedy, accidents that had befallen those who had dared to grace its stage. But on this fateful night, it wasn't the theater itself that would bring forth misfortune, it was the marionette. Leo, a skilled puppeteer with a penchant for the peculiar, had stumbled upon an old and mysterious marionette. Its wooden form was weathered and cracked, and its painted eyes seemed to hold an unnerving glint. The marionette was said to be cursed, whispered to possess a malevolent spirit that manipulated its puppeteer to enact its revenge. Undeterred by the ominous rumors, Leo was drawn to the marionette's eerie charm. He believed that the ancient wooden figure held secrets that could elevate his performances to new heights. Ignoring the warnings of his fellow performers, he purchased the marionette from an equally enigmatic antique dealer. As Leo practiced his craft with the cursed marionette, he couldn't help but marvel at its lifelike movements. It was as if the wooden puppet had a mind of its own, guiding his hands with a chilling precision. But soon, he began to notice a sinister pattern emerge. Accidents plagued the theater's productions. Props fell from the rafters, stage lights shattered, and even the grand chandelier, a magnificent centerpiece of the theater, came crashing down during a performance. The theater's history of tragic accidents was repeating itself, and Leo couldn't help but feel that the marionette was somehow responsible. One evening, as Leo prepared for another show, the marionette's painted eyes seemed to gleam with an unsettling malice. It moved with a life of its own, pulling strings Leo hadn't touched. The marionette danced across the stage, executing intricate and dangerous maneuvers that Leo had never taught it. The audience gasped in awe and terror, believing it to be part of the act. But Leo knew better. He had lost control, and the marionette was now the puppeteer, and he was the puppet. In the midst of the chaos, Leo's hand brushed against a hidden compartment in the marionette's chest. Inside, he found a faded photograph, a picture of a young woman with striking resemblance to the antique dealer who had sold him the cursed puppet. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The marionette was indeed cursed, and it carried with it the vengeful spirit of the antique dealer's daughter, who had once dreamed of becoming a renowned puppeteer. Her dreams were shattered, and she met a tragic end on the very stage where Leo now performed. The marionette was enacting her revenge, using Leo as her instrument of destruction. Desperation gripped him as he realized the extent of the curse's power. He had become a puppet himself, manipulated by the vengeful spirit within the marionette. In a final act of defiance, Leo mustered all his strength and wrestled control away from the malevolent marionette. The audience watched in horror as the puppeteer battled his own creation, strings tangling and snapping in the struggle for dominance. With a final, desperate tug, Leo severed the marionette's strings, ending its reign of terror. The antique puppet fell to the stage, lifeless and devoid of the sinister spirit that had plagued it for so long. As the audience erupted into applause, Leo knew that he had broken the curse, but the cost had been high. The grand theater was now devoid of its ominous shadow, and the curse that had haunted it for years had been vanquished. But Leo could never forget the malevolent force that had taken control of him, nor the tragic fate of the vengeful spirit that had cursed the marionette. The theater's dark history would forever be etched into his memory, a chilling reminder of the power of ancient curses and the curse of creativity itself. The Doll That Wept. In a small, quaint village nestled among rolling hills and surrounded by a dense forest, there lived a child named Anna. Her village had always been known for its charming cottages, cobblestone streets, and the mysterious legend of the weeping doll. One misty morning, as the village awoke to find crops withered and livestock sickly, Anna couldn't resist the urge to seek out the doll. With whispers of the legend echoing in her mind, she made her way to the edge of the forest, where the doll was rumored to reside. There, beneath the canopy of ancient oaks, she discovered an abandoned, dilapidated cottage, its windows overgrown with ivy. In the dim light filtering through the leaves, Anna saw the doll, perched upon an old rocking chair. Its porcelain face was cracked, and its eyes were red and puffy, as though it had been crying for centuries. Anna cautiously approached the doll, her heart pounding. She reached out to touch its tear-streaked cheeks, and as her fingers brushed against the wet porcelain, the doll's eyes blinked, and its lips quivered in a semblance of a smile. The village had been plagued by misfortunes, and Anna believed that the doll held the key to their salvation. She decided to bring it back to the village, hoping to unravel the mystery of its tears and, in doing so, lift the curse that had befallen her home. As Anna returned to the village with the weeping doll in her arms, she could feel the villagers' unease. They had heard the legends and seen the hardships that followed. Nevertheless, Anna was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the curse head-on. Days turned into weeks as Anna delved into the village's history, seeking answers about the doll's origin. She discovered that it had once belonged to a grieving mother who had lost her child to a terrible illness. The doll was a gift from her husband, an attempt to ease her heartache. But when the mother passed away, the doll remained, forever weeping for the loss of its owner and the child she had lost. Anna's research led her to an old journal, filled with the anguished writings of the mother. She learned that the doll's tears were believed to carry the weight of her sorrow, and the legend had emerged as a warning to keep the doll at bay. Determined to end the village's suffering, Anna made a solemn decision. She would find a way to lay the weeping doll and its eternal sorrow to rest. She called upon the village's wisest elder, Mrs. Hawthorne, who was well versed in ancient rituals and traditions. Together, Anna and Mrs. Hawthorne conducted a solemn ceremony in the village square. With a heavy heart, Anna placed the weeping doll upon a pyre made of dried herbs and flowers. The doll's porcelain face seemed to contort with sadness as the flames began to consume it. As the fire consumed the doll, a profound sense of sadness washed over Anna. She watched the tears of the doll evaporate into the smoke, rising to the heavens. The villagers gathered around, their eyes fixed on the pyre, as if willing the curse to be broken. Suddenly, the wind shifted, and the sky darkened. A cold breeze blew through the square, extinguishing the flames and sending ashes swirling into the air. Anna and the villagers watched in awe as the ashes formed a ghostly figure, a mother holding her long-lost child. Tears welled in Anna's eyes as she realized the truth. The doll's tears were not a curse but a testament to the enduring love of a mother for her child. The ancient sorrow that had hung over the village for generations was finally set free. With a sense of closure, the villagers returned to their homes, their hearts lighter than they had been in years. The withered crops began to flourish, and the sickly livestock regained their health. Anna knew that the weeping doll had brought not misfortune, but a long overdue release of sorrow. As for Anna, she had uncovered a lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her days: the weight of history and the power of love. The legend of the weeping doll would forever remain in the village's memory, a reminder of the enduring strength of a mother's love and the importance of understanding the truth that lay hidden behind even the most enigmatic legends. Shadows in the Nursery. James had always been drawn to the eerie and the abandoned. He was an urban explorer, seeking out forgotten places, the decaying remnants of lives once lived. It was on one of these explorations that he stumbled upon the nursery. The nursery had been abandoned for decades, nestled in the depths of an old, crumbling mansion. The wooden floorboards creaked under James's cautious steps as he entered the dimly lit room. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs hung like delicate veils over decaying toys and forgotten dolls. As he ventured deeper into the nursery, he felt an inexplicable chill in the air. The atmosphere seemed to shift, as though the room itself was holding its breath. James's flashlight cast eerie shadows upon the walls, revealing rows of forgotten dolls, their eyes void of life. Each doll had its unique features, but their expressions shared a sense of melancholy. It was as though they were waiting, yearning for something long lost. James couldn't resist the urge to pick up one of the dolls, its porcelain face cool to the touch. As he held it, he noticed something peculiar. The doll's eyes seemed to follow his every move, and for a moment it felt like the doll was alive. Shivers ran down James's spine as he gently placed the doll back on the dusty shelf. He knew he wasn't alone in the nursery. Faint whispers danced on the edges of his hearing, like the laughter of children playing in the distance. With a deep breath, James continued to explore the room. As he moved through the rows of decaying toys, the whispers grew louder, the giggles more pronounced. It was as though the spirits of children were trapped in the very walls of the nursery. He reached for another doll, this one with a cracked face and tattered dress. As he touched it, the whispers intensified. He could make out faint words, stories of childhoods long gone, of laughter and tears. It was as though the dolls were reliving the moments of their past. James's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of the surreal experience. He knew he had to uncover the truth behind the nursery and the restless spirits that inhabited it. In the days that followed, James delved into the history of the mansion. He discovered that it had once been an orphanage, a place where children sought refuge from a world filled with hardship. But as he dug deeper, he uncovered a darker truth. The orphanage had been run by a cruel matron who had subjected the children to unimaginable horrors. Their laughter had turned to tears, and their innocence had been stolen away. It was a grim chapter in the mansion's history that had remained hidden for years. Armed with this newfound knowledge, James returned to the nursery. This time, he approached the dolls with purpose, ready to confront the spirits that dwelled within them. As he touched each doll, he whispered words of comfort and apology. He acknowledged the pain they had suffered and the innocence they had lost. And one by one, the dolls began to change. Their porcelain faces transformed, and their eyes ceased to follow his every move. Instead, they seemed to regain a sense of peace. The whispers that had once filled the room grew softer, fading into the ether. But as James reached the final doll, the one with the cracked face and tattered dress, he felt a sudden, overwhelming sadness. He realized that this doll had once belonged to a child who had suffered the most. As he whispered his words of comfort, the room grew colder and the shadows deepened. The whispers of the children grew louder, more insistent. And then, in a heart-wrenching moment, the doll's cracked face began to weep real tears. Tears fell from its porcelain eyes, each drop carrying with it the pain and sorrow of a long-forgotten child. James could feel the weight of that sorrow in his chest, aching and heavy. In that moment, the room seemed to come alive with the presence of the children. Their giggles and laughter filled the air, no longer tinged with sorrow but with the joy of release. The shadows that had once haunted the nursery now danced in a playful display of light. With a heavy heart, James left the nursery, knowing that he had helped the spirits find peace. The mansion, once shrouded in darkness, now seemed to radiate a sense of tranquility. As he stepped out into the fading light of day, he couldn't help but think of the children and the innocence they had lost. The nursery had been a place of shadows, but now it was a place of healing, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who had suffered and, at long last, found solace. The collector. In a quiet suburban home, nestled away from the hustle and bustle of the world, Helen had created her own peculiar haven. Her passion for collecting dolls had grown into an obsession, filling every nook and cranny of her once pristine house. Walls adorned with shelves held rows upon rows of porcelain faces, each doll a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Helen had always been a collector at heart, from antique teapots to vintage books. Her interests had evolved over the years, but it was the world of dolls that had captivated her like nothing else. Each doll seemed to tell a story, and she cherished them as if they were her own children. One day, while browsing a local antique shop, Helen stumbled upon a doll that sent a shiver down her spine. It was unlike any she had ever seen, standing out amidst the porcelain beauties. This doll had an aura of malevolence, with piercing, ebony eyes that seemed to bore into her soul. Its twisted smile sent a chill through her very core. The shop owner noticed Helen's fascination with the doll and decided to part with it at a significantly lower price than she had expected. Helen couldn't resist the temptation, and with a sense of unease, she brought the ominous doll home. From the moment she placed it among her cherished collection, strange things began to happen. Dolls that had once stood proudly now seemed to bow in submission to the new arrival. Their delicate hands, once gracefully poised, now reached out as if yearning for something. The doll's ebony eyes appeared to follow Helen as she moved about the room, a feeling of unease settling deep within her. Helen couldn't help but spend hours studying the malevolent doll. She would often lose herself in its piercing gaze, feeling as though it held the secrets of the universe. Her other dolls, once the source of her joy, began to gather dust, neglected and forgotten. As the weeks passed, Helen's obsession with the new doll grew. She would spend her days and nights in the doll room, arranging and rearranging the collection, always ensuring the sinister doll held a place of prominence. Her friends and family, once regular visitors, were now met with excuses and isolation. One evening, as Helen sat in the dimly lit room, she thought she heard a faint whisper coming from the direction of the doll. Her heart raced as she leaned in closer, straining to hear. The whisper grew louder, like a chorus of voices from beyond the grave. Collect them all, the voices chanted, their words echoing through her mind. Collect them all, or suffer the consequences. Fear gripped Helen's heart as she realized that the sinister doll was somehow commanding her to expand her collection. She felt an overwhelming compulsion to comply, a fear of what might happen if she refused. Driven by an insatiable urge, Helen scoured the internet and combed through dusty antique stores, collecting more dolls than ever before. Her obsession had consumed her, and her once beautiful home was now a nightmarish labyrinth of porcelain faces and hollow eyes. As the collection grew, so did the malevolent influence of the sinister doll. Helen's nights were plagued by nightmares of her dolls coming to life, their delicate hands reaching out to drag her into their world of darkness. She could no longer distinguish between dreams and reality, her days blurred by an overwhelming sense of paranoia. One fateful night, as the moon cast eerie shadows through the doll room, Helen felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She turned, trembling with fear, to find the sinister doll standing before her. Its ebony eyes seemed to swirl with malevolence, and its twisted smile sent terror coursing through her veins. "Your collection is complete," the doll whispered, its voice a sinister hiss. "And now, it's time for you to join us." With a sudden, supernatural strength, the dolls that had once been her cherished companions sprang to life, their delicate hands reaching out for Helen. She screamed in terror as they closed in, their porcelain fingers tightening around her. But in the midst of her despair, a voice echoed in her mind. It was the voice of reason, the part of her that still clung to sanity. With every ounce of strength left in her, Helen tore herself free from the grasp of her collection and fled the room. She never looked back as she ran from her once beloved dolls, leaving her home and her obsession behind. The sinister doll, its malevolent influence waning, was left behind in the dark room, surrounded by a collection of dolls that would never harm anyone again. Helen's life would never be the same. The scars of her obsession would linger, a constant reminder of the dangers of unchecked desire. The suburban home, once filled with dolls and darkness, would slowly return to its former serenity. But Helen would always carry with her the haunting memories of the collector and the sinister doll that nearly consumed her soul. The Puppeteer's Legacy. In the heart of a dense, shadowy forest, an old, secluded cabin stood as a forgotten testament to the art of puppetry. Carl, a reclusive puppet maker, had spent his life in this rustic dwelling, crafting his eerie creations with meticulous care. But Carl's mastery over the art of puppetry harbored a sinister secret. The cabin's interior was a labyrinth of wooden shelves, each one filled with a multitude of handmade puppets. Their lifeless eyes stared out, each puppet bearing an uncanny resemblance to its creator. Carl had always been absorbed in his craft, and his puppets were not mere toys, they were reflections of his innermost desires and fears. As the years passed, Carl's obsession with puppetry grew, and he spent countless hours in the cabin, perfecting his creations. But as he delved deeper into the world of puppetry, an eerie transformation overtook him. The lines between the man and his marionettes blurred, as if the souls of his puppets had woven themselves into his very being. One fateful night, as a storm raged outside the cabin, Carl sat at his work table, lost in the creation of his latest masterpiece. The puppet took shape, eerily resembling a twisted version of its creator. As Carl completed the final touches, an ominous presence seemed to descend upon the cabin. Suddenly, the puppets surrounding him began to stir. Their lifeless limbs twitched and jerked as if awakened by some unseen force. Carl watched in horror as they moved, each one mimicking his own actions with an unsettling precision. It was as if they had absorbed his essence, gaining a grotesque semblance of life. The storm outside raged on, its fury mirrored by the chaos inside the cabin. The puppeteer and his grotesque creations danced a macabre ballet, their movements growing more frenzied with each passing moment. Carl's sanity slipped away as he realized that he had become a puppet himself, controlled by his own creation. Weeks turned into months, and Carl's cabin became a cursed sanctuary of puppetry. The forest around it seemed to shun the dark presence that had taken root within, the trees bending away as if recoiling in fear. The puppets' thirst for life grew insatiable, and they craved more than mere mimicry. They longed to experience the world outside. One by one, the people of the nearby village began to disappear, leaving behind only eerie wooden replicas in their wake. The puppeteer's creations had become twisted doppelgangers, their hollow eyes and grotesque grins mocking the humanity they had stolen. as the villagers whispered of a malevolent force dwelling in the forest. One young woman named Eliza grew determined to uncover the truth. Armed with courage and a sense of duty, she ventured into the dense woods, guided by the distant echoes of unsettling laughter that seemed to emanate from the cursed cabin. Eliza cautiously approached the cabin, its darkened windows revealing nothing of the horrors that lay within. As she pushed open the creaking door, she was met with a sight that chilled her to the bone. The cabin's interior was a nightmarish tableau of puppetry, with grotesque wooden figures suspended from the ceiling and lining the walls. Amidst the chaos, Eliza spotted Carl, his eyes vacant and lifeless, his strings manipulated by his own creation. The puppets' malevolent laughter filled the air as they danced their grotesque dance of death around their puppeteer. Eliza knew that she had to act quickly. With courage born of desperation, she lunged at the puppeteer, severing the strings that bound him to his creations. The moment she did, the puppets' movements grew erratic and disjointed, their wooden bodies collapsing to the floor. In that final, chaotic moment, Carl's marionettes fell silent, their grotesque semblance of life extinguished. The storm outside subsided, and a profound stillness settled over the cabin. Eliza had put an end to the puppeteer's legacy, but the horror of what she had witnessed would forever haunt her. The cursed cabin was abandoned once more, its twisted secrets locked away in the heart of the forest. As the years passed, the memory of Carl's dark puppetry faded into legend, a story whispered around campfires to send shivers down the spines of those who dared listen. The puppeteer's legacy was a chilling reminder of the blurred line between art and madness, a testament to the grotesque power of creations that hungered for life. Echoes of porcelain. Rachel had always been drawn to the mysterious and the unexplained, so when she was offered the opportunity to house at an old mansion for the summer, she eagerly accepted. The mansion was a beautiful, imposing structure, but there was one room that had always intrigued her, an attic room filled with an astonishing collection of pristine, untouched dolls. As she entered the attic, Rachel was immediately struck by the eerie atmosphere. The dolls sat in rows upon rows, their porcelain faces expressionless yet watchful. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow her every move, and she couldn't help but shiver. Over the days that followed, Rachel couldn't resist the pull of the dolls' room. She would spend hours examining their delicate features, their finely crafted clothing, and the intricate details of their miniature world. But there was something about the dolls that unnerved her. It was as if they held a secret, a whispered tale of lives long past. One evening, as Rachel sat in the attic, she noticed something strange. A sudden chill ran down her spine as she realized that the dolls seemed to be moving on their own. She had left them arranged neatly on their shelves, yet now they were in different positions. Some had turned their heads, while others had shifted their limbs. Doubting her own senses, Rachel began to wonder if she was simply imagining things. Perhaps the stillness of the attic had played tricks on her mind. She decided to leave the attic and put the bizarre incident out of her thoughts. But as the days went by, the dolls' movements became more pronounced. Rachel would find them in new arrangements each morning, as if they had a life of their own. She couldn't explain it, and it sent a shiver down her spine every time she entered the room. One night, unable to sleep, Rachel decided to explore the mansion's history. She was determined to uncover the secrets of the dolls. As she delved into old documents and letters, she began to piece together the tragic story behind the collection. The dolls had once belonged to a young girl named Abigail, who had lived in the mansion many years ago. Abigail had been an only child and had treasured her dolls above all else. She would spend hours playing with them, arranging them in intricate tableaus, and speaking to them as if they were her dearest friends. But as Rachel continued to read, she discovered the darkest part of the story. Abigail's life had been one of isolation and loneliness. Her parents, consumed by their own affairs, had left her to her own devices. Abigail had found solace in her dolls, pouring her heart and soul into them. As the years went by, Abigail's obsession with the dolls had grown. She had spent all her time with them, rarely leaving the confines of the mansion. Her once cherished collection had become a suffocating prison of porcelain faces and lifeless eyes. One day, Abigail had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the dolls that had once been her closest companion. The mansion had fallen into disrepair, and the room had been sealed off, preserving the dolls as a haunting tribute to their former owner. As Rachel uncovered this tragic tale, the dolls seemed to take on a new significance. It was as if they were trying to communicate their own sorrow, to share the weight of the past that had bound them to the mansion. Rachel's unease continued to grow, and she felt an overwhelming need to set the dolls free from their silent torment. She decided to gather them all in the attic, arranging them in a circle as she had seen them in the old photographs of Abigail's playtime. With trembling hands, Rachel lit a single candle in the center of the circle and began to speak. She spoke of Abigail's loneliness, her desperate need for companionship, and the heavy burden of secrets that had driven her away from the world. As she spoke, the dolls seemed to come to life, their glassy eyes reflecting flickering candlelight. Rachel felt an overwhelming surge of emotion as she realized that she was not alone in the attic. She was surrounded by echoes of Porcelain, the silent witnesses to Abigail's tragic tale. In that moment, Rachel understood the true nature of the dolls. They were not malevolent spirits or haunted objects, but vessels of memory and sorrow. They longed to be heard, to share their story with the world. As she finished her story, the room grew still once more, the dolls returning to their lifeless positions. But Rachel felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. She had given voice to the echoes of Porcelain, and in doing so, she had set them free. With a heavy heart, Rachel left the attic, knowing that she had played her part in bringing closure to a long-forgotten chapter of the mansion's history. The dolls remained in their room, no longer bearing the weight of secrets, but still watching over the mansion, their porcelain faces forever frozen in a silent vigil. The Ventriloquist Shadow. The old theater stood as a relic of days long past, its faded marquee still proclaiming the names of performers who had once graced its stage. But now, the once vibrant venue was locked in silence, its seats empty, its stage bare. Derek, a struggling ventriloquist, had always been drawn to the theater's eerie history. He had heard the rumors of haunted dressing rooms, phantom footsteps echoing in the corridors, and the malevolent presence that seemed to linger in the darkness. For Derek, this theater was a place of both fascination and fear. One fateful day, as Derek was rummaging through the theater's forgotten props and costumes, he stumbled upon an old, eerie dummy. Its wooden features were worn and cracked, and its glassy eyes held an unsettling gaze. It was a ventriloquist dummy like no other, its sinister appearance sending shivers down Derek's spine. Curiosity piqued. Derek decided to take the dummy with him, thinking it might breathe new life into his struggling act. He named the puppet Mr. Mortimer and began to incorporate it into his performances. At first, everything seemed to be going well. Derek and Mr. Mortimer quickly became the talk of the small town, drawing curious audiences to witness their ventriloquism act. But as the shows went on, Derek noticed something unsettling. Mr. Mortimer seemed to have a mind of its own. During their performances, the dummy would sometimes say things that Derek hadn't planned, making snide remarks and even insulting the audience. It was as if the puppet had a malevolent agenda of its own, and Derek was merely a vessel for its dark thoughts. As the weeks passed, the dummy's behavior grew more and more unpredictable. Derek would often wake in the middle of the night to find Mr. Mortimer sitting at the foot of his bed, its glassy eyes fixed on him in the darkness. It was a chilling sight that filled him with dread. One evening, during a particularly tense performance, Mr. Mortimer took things to a new level. It began to insult Derek in front of the entire audience, revealing personal secrets and dredging up painful memories from his past. Derek struggled to regain control, but it was as if the dummy had a sinister power over him. After the disastrous show, Derek decided it was time to confront the unsettling truth about Mr. Mortimer. He delved into the history of the theater and discovered a dark secret that sent shivers down his spine. Decades ago, the theater had been home to a notorious ventriloquist named Theodore Blackwood. Blackwood had been known for his dark and macabre performances, using a malevolent dummy named Mortimer. His shows were a sensation, drawing audiences from far and wide, but they were also said to be cursed. Legend had it that Mortimer, the dummy, had a life of its own, and that it had whispered dark secrets into Blackwood's ear, driving him to madness. In the end, Blackwood had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind only his malevolent dummy. Derek realized with growing horror that the dummy he now possessed was none other than Mortimer, the infamous puppet of Theodore Blackwood. The sinister spirit that had plagued Blackwood's performances had now found a new host in Derek. Desperate to rid himself of the malevolent dummy, Derek tried everything he could think of. He attempted to burn it, bury it, and even throw it into a river, but each time, Mr. Mortimer would mysteriously reappear in his life, as if it refused to be separated from its new ventriloquist. Derek's life began to unravel as Mr. Mortimer's malevolence consumed him. He lost his job, his friends, and his sanity. It was as if the puppet had taken control of his life, manipulating him into a living nightmare. One fateful night, as Derek sat alone in the empty theater, he finally confronted Mr. Mortimer. With tears in his eyes, he begged the puppet to release him from its grip, to end the torment that had consumed his life. In response, Mr. Mortimer's wooden features contorted into a sinister grin, and it whispered words that chilled Derek's soul. "You cannot escape me, Derek," it hissed. "I am your shadow, your darkness, your true self." Derek realized with a sinking feeling that he was not the puppeteer, but the puppet. Mr. Mortimer was merely a reflection of the darkness that had always lurked within him. In a final, desperate act, Derek grabbed the puppet and hurled it onto the stage, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. As the wooden fragments lay scattered on the stage, Derek felt a weight lift from his soul. He knew that he could never truly be free of the darkness that had consumed him, but at least he had rid himself of its physical manifestation. The old theater remained silent, its secrets buried in the past. Derek walked away, forever haunted by the memories of Mr. Mortimer and the chilling realization of the darkness that had always lurked within him, waiting to be unleashed. The broken doll. Lisa had always been drawn to abandoned places, finding beauty in the decay and the stories they told. Her camera was her faithful companion on these journeys, capturing the forgotten moments frozen in time. But when she heard about the sprawling, forgotten toy factory at the edge of town, she knew she had to explore it. The factory, once a bustling hub of creativity and dreams, now stood in eerie silence. Its windows were broken, its machinery rusted, and the toys that had once filled its shelves lay discarded and forgotten. Lisa's footsteps echoed through the cavernous building as she ventured deeper into the darkness, her camera's flash revealing the haunting remnants of a bygone era. Amidst the dust and debris, Lisa noticed something that caught her eye. It was a broken doll, lying amidst a pile of discarded toys. Its porcelain face was shattered, and its once rosy cheeks were now smeared with dirt. Its limbs were twisted at odd angles, and its glass eyes stared blankly into the distance. Lisa couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness as she looked at the broken doll. It seemed to symbolize the forgotten and neglected, left behind in the relentless march of time. She raised her camera to capture the doll's forlorn image, but as the flash illuminated its shattered face, something strange happened. The doll's eyes seemed to flicker with a malevolent glint, and its broken features twisted into a grotesque grin. Lisa shuddered, convinced it was a trick of the light. She continued to explore the factory, her unease growing with each passing moment. As she ventured deeper into the heart of the factory, Lisa heard faint whispers echoing through the abandoned corridors. It was as if the very walls held the murmured secrets of the past, and the voices grew louder and more insistent as she approached a locked door at the end of a dimly lit hallway. With trembling hands, Lisa managed to force the door open, revealing a hidden room bathed in an eerie, dim light. Inside, she found rows upon rows of dolls, all with shattered porcelain faces and twisted limbs, just like the one she had encountered earlier. It was a chilling sight, and Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that these dolls were more than they appeared. As she began to take photographs of the haunting scene, the dolls' whispers grew louder, their voices filling the room with an otherworldly chorus. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that the dolls were not inanimate objects but something else entirely. Suddenly, the dolls began to move, their broken limbs twitching and jerking as if guided by some unseen force. Lisa stumbled backward in terror, her camera clattering to the floor. She watched in horror as the dolls began to rise from their shelves, their glass eyes fixated on her. In a nightmarish procession, the dolls advanced toward Lisa, their movements grotesque and unnatural. Their whispers grew louder, forming words that chilled her to the bone. They spoke of abandonment, neglect, and the anger that had festered within them for years. Lisa backed away, her fear mounting with each step. She felt trapped in the room with these vengeful dolls, their broken faces contorted in anger and malice. It was as if they blamed her for their plight, for discovering their hidden world. Desperation filled Lisa as she searched for a way out. She spotted a window on the far side of the room and made a dash for it. With all her strength, she shattered the glass and tumbled out onto the factory grounds. Gasping for breath, Lisa looked back at the factory. The broken doll that had initially caught her attention stood in the shattered window, its malevolent eyes locked onto her. It raised a twisted, porcelain hand and pointed accusingly. As Lisa fled from the factory, she couldn't shake the feeling that the dolls were still following her, their whispers haunting her every step. She knew that she had stumbled upon something malevolent, something that should have remained hidden in the shadows of the past. The toy factory remained a place of darkness and secrets, its haunted dolls waiting for the next unsuspecting visitor to discover their tragic tale of neglect and revenge. Lisa had survived her encounter, but the broken doll's malevolent glare would forever haunt her nightmares, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the forgotten corners of the world.